Live video starting. Okay, there we are, we're live. Now what I need to do is put the camera on Kenny.
We're live.
Okay, Mark.
I can stand over there and do the invitation.
Huh? Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Brian. Thank you, buddy.
Kenny's coming over.
Okay, you gonna come over there, Kenny?
Just be fine.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to read the thing.
Okay, read this out to the invitation, right?
Yes, it's right there on the agenda. Yeah, right after the invitation and the pledge. Do we have any? Where's Bill? Okay, I'm ready. We're ready.
All right, we're live.
All right, gentlemen. We got the lights going. No. You guys
We're almost ready.
And so we're going to have to hold it up, invocation, then the pledge, and then the memorial piece for the Medal of Honor. Just that period. He'll read fast. Okay? Bill? Bill? You have the microphone? Well, where's the other one? Oh, here it is. Okay. Here, Bill.
There's several.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
If you would, please join me in prayer. Our dearest Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning with thanksgiving for this inclement weather, because we know that in your plan it sustains us and sustains the world. Even though it's an inconvenience to us, we ask that you keep us safe here in the city of Virginia Beach during this inclement weather. We also ask that you help our police officers, our firemen, our first responders, as they go through their daily chores and chance evil in order to save lives. With a special prayer this morning, we ask you to go out and help us, give us the knowledge that we can learn how to cure childhood diseases like the horrible scourge of cancer on our young children. In your blessed name we pray. Amen. All right, if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kenny?
All right. I'm reading to you a citation that was read in 1865 by President Andrew Johnson for Dr. Mary E. Walker, the first female recipient of the Medal of Honor. Whereas it appears from official records that Mary E. Walker, a graduate of medicine, has rendered invaluable service to the government, and her efforts have been earnest and untiring in a variety of ways, and that she was assigned to duty and served as an assistant surgeon in charge of female prisoners at Louisville, Kentucky, upon the recommendation of Major General Sherman and Thomas, and faithfully served as a contract surgeon in the service of the United States, and has devoted herself with much patriotic zeal to the sick and wounded soldiers, both in the field and hospitals, to the detriment of her own health, and has also endured hardships as a prisoner of war 4 months in a southern prison while acting as a contract surgeon. And whereas by reason of her not being a commissioned officer in the military service, a brevet or honorary rank cannot, under existing laws, be conferred upon her, and whereas the opinion of the President and honorable recognition of her service and suffering should be made, it is ordered that a testimonial thereof shall be hereby made and given to said Dr. Mary E. Walker, and that the usual Medal of Honor for meritorious service be given to her, given under my hand in the city of Washington, D.C., this 11th day of November, 1865.
Very inspiring. Thank you.
She is, to this day, she is the only female to have served to receive the Medal of Honor. The only one to this day. Yeah.
Guess she suffered quite a bit. Deserved it. All right, folks, we are very lucky today to have our guest speaker. I wish we had more people here in attendance, but there'll be people watching this on Facebook, and they're going to learn something today. Something well beyond politics, but it includes politics. Our guest speaker is Steve Goreham. He's a speaker and author, a researcher on environmental issues, and an independent columnist. He's the executive director of the Climate Science Coalition of America and an advisor to the Heartland Institute. Goreham is the author of 4 books, a very new one, called Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. That's the one I haven't got yet. I'm going to get it today. More than 100,000 copies of his books are now in print. Goreham holds a BS and MS in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois, and he has an MBA from the University of Chicago. He has more than 30 years of experience in Fortune 100 and private companies in engineering and executive roles. And Steve will present The Coming Fall of Climatism, a program covering climate change, energy, and public policy. So thank you very much, Steve, and everyone give him a good welcome. Where does he want you standing?
He's got it.
Thank you, Dr. Duke.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to join you this morning. Thanks for your efforts for liberty and freedom and good government in this nation. Today I'm going to talk first about climate change and then talk about renewables, net zero, and electric vehicles. A few amusing items from our mad world of climatism, and then the future. About 210 years ago, back in August of 1814, the British captured Washington, D.C. during the War of 1812. And they set fire to the city. And less than a day later, there was a big storm that hit the city. Tremendous rains put out the fire. And there was actually a tornado that came right up Constitution Avenue and started throwing cannon around, killed British soldiers, killed Washington citizens alike. And the British withdrew from the city. It was called the storm that saved Washington. And on the way out of the city, an admiral up on his horse spoke to a woman of the city and said, Madam, is this the kind of weather that you're accustomed to in this infernal nation? And she said, no, sir, this is a special providence from our Lord to drive our invaders from the city. And many of their ships were damaged and they left. But can you imagine what they would say today? They would say this is caused by your neighbor's SUV and it's from man-made global warming. Are humans destroying Earth's climate?
I've had a moment of decision. Our home, Earth, is in danger. What is at risk of being destroyed is not the planet itself, of course, but the conditions that have made it hospitable for human beings.
Climate change and our environmental challenges are one of the biggest existential threats to our way of life, not just as a nation, but as a world.
Well, patriots of Virginia, we live in a world of superstition. Every year we have tens of thousands of people march around the world demanding that their political leaders control global temperatures. And many of these marchers believe that if they change their light bulbs, they can save polar bears. And if we build wind turbines across our land, we can stop the oceans from rising. And if we all drive electric vehicles, the storms will be less severe and less frequent. I call this climatism, the belief that humans are causing dangerous global warming. And the theory of man-made warming is accepted by more than 190 heads of state today, the United Nations, most of our major scientific organizations, most of our Fortune 500 companies, the news media, and our leading universities. And the world is spending about $1 trillion a year on renewables to try and stop the planet from warming. The theory of man-made warming is based on 4 principles. In the top left, the greenhouse effect. Sunlight enters our atmosphere. What isn't reflected by clouds is absorbed by the surface of the Earth. The Earth, like any warm body, gives off lower energy infrared radiation. A tiny amount of that goes directly out into space, but almost all is captured by greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. Those gases then re-radiate that energy, and that does tend to warm the surface of the Earth. The second is rising atmospheric carbon dioxide levels on the bottom left. Modern measurements were first made in the 1950s, and at that time they measured about 315 parts per million concentration of CO2 in our atmosphere. That's risen to over 400 parts per million. And the proponents of the theory of man-made warming say this is caused by our industry, it's enhancing the greenhouse effect, and it's causing global temperatures to rise. The third basis is rising global surface temperatures, top right. But these temperatures haven't gone up very much recently. They've gone up about 1 degree Celsius in 140 years, since 1880, and we've had thermometers, or about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the fourth basis is computer model projections. Supercomputers like this one in England run climate models. Those climate models forecast a rise of about 3 degrees Celsius by 2100, or 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And you've all heard about the coming disasters, melting ice caps, rising ocean levels flooding our coastal cities, stronger hurricanes and storms, droughts and floods, species extinction, and many other problems. But ladies and gentlemen from Virginia, there is no empirical evidence that increasing greenhouse gases are the primary cause of global warming. Consider the world's oldest temperature metric. These are temperatures from central New England. They've had this metric, they've been tracking it since about 1660, and temperatures have risen about 2 degrees Celsius in central England over that period. I'm going to superimpose on that the amount of man-made carbon dioxide emissions, which were negligible until the end of World War II. There it is. This is the rise in annual human carbon dioxide emissions. Can anybody see where that curve has changed because of those CO2 emissions? Really no change at all. Now, we had headlines last year in about July. A scientist did a study, and he claimed that that July was the hottest month in 120,000 years. And that was widely broadcast all over the media, AP, CNN, and everywhere, rarely challenged. At the same time, the United Nations said we've entered the era of global boiling. But this is flat out wrong, folks. If you look at the actual evidence, this is data from ice cores over the last 10,000 years. You see there were many warm periods. There was a medieval warm period about 1,000 years ago when the Vikings settled southwest Greenland. And they farmed and they raised livestock on Greenland. About 2,000 years ago, the Roman soldiers captured the Mediterranean in those little skirts. At that time, in what was to become Germany, they were growing olives. And what was to become England, they were producing grapes for wine. But we've had many multi-century long periods in the last 10,000 years when it's been warmer than today. Today's temperatures are not abnormally warm. An example is the Rhone Glacier, if any of you have been to central Switzerland. The Rhone Glacier is a mountainside to mountainside wide glacier. The Rhone River flows out of it, goes into France, down into the Mediterranean. This glacier has been receding for at least a couple centuries, but every time it pulls back, they find things like wagon wheels that were under it, and horse bridles, and 4,000-year-old wood. And scientists have pointed out that for most of the last 10,000 years, this valley has been ice-free. The glacier has not been here, indicating another bit of evidence, and there's much, much more, that it was warmer in the past than it is today. I'm probably going to have to repeat this. This is a former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie talking about climate, but the audio cuts off the first couple seconds, so we'll see.
Is occurring and that humans play a contributing role?
So he said climate change is occurring and humans play a contributing role. Well, that's a true statement. I agree with that statement, but that's a meaningless statement. Climate change has always been occurring throughout Earth's history, and my 12-pound dog plays a contributing role. The real question is, what is the size of the human contribution relative to natural factors? Because Earth's climate is complex. This is just a simplified diagram. It's shaped by powerful forces in the solar system, the atmosphere, the oceans, and the land. Sunlight drives all weather on Earth. Sunlight falls directly on the equator and the tropics, where much energy is absorbed. It falls indirectly on the Arctic regions, where little energy is absorbed. All weather on Earth is driven by this temperature difference. Storm fronts, the jet stream, ocean currents, hurricanes, all act to redistribute energy from the tropics to the poles. The oceans have a powerful effect on Earth's climate. The oceans have 250 times the mass of the atmosphere and can hold more than 1,000 times the heat. And then we have aerosols, dust from volcanoes, desert dust, pollen from plants, going up into the atmosphere and shaping Earth's climate. Yet today's climate scientists are obsessed with the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, a very small part of the overall picture. And indeed, CO2 is a trace gas. One way to think about it is to picture a basketball arena at an NCAA game. Only 4 of every 10,000 molecules in the atmosphere are carbon dioxide. And in all of our history, humans are responsible for only a fraction of 1 of those 10,000 molecules. So I'll have a couple questions for you today. Feel free to fire out the answer. The first is, what is nature's most abundant greenhouse gas? Water vapor is the correct answer. It's not methane, it's not carbon dioxide. Water vapor is Earth's dominant greenhouse gas. And you remember, the greenhouse effect is what's blamed for global warming. Scientists estimate that somewhere between 70% and 90% of Earth's greenhouse effect is caused by water vapor and clouds. So if we break down the greenhouse effect and we're conservative, and we say, okay, 3/4 of it is caused by water vapor and clouds, then the last quarter is mostly due to carbon dioxide and a little bit of methane and other gases. But then we need to question about that last quarter, how much of that is man-made and how much is natural? Because the oceans hold 50 times as much carbon dioxide naturally dissolved as the atmosphere. And the oceans are always releasing CO2 and absorbing it. When plants die, carbon dioxide is released. And when they grow, carbon dioxide is absorbed. And then we have volcanoes, both above the surface of the ocean and about 10 times as many under the surface of the ocean, putting gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, into the environment all the time. Every day, nature puts about 20 times as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as all of Earth's industries. So when we roll this together, we find that human industry is responsible for about 1 or 2 parts per 100 of Earth's greenhouse effect. Who's heard that in the press? Nobody. We all hear about how we are enhancing the greenhouse effect or causing it. But humans are responsible for only about 1 or 2% of Earth's greenhouse effect. That means if we completely eliminate carbon dioxide emissions, we probably will not be able to measure the difference in global temperatures. But aren't weather events more extreme?
Altitude levels rise, temperatures rise. The result, as the world gets warmer, the climate changes. and extreme weather events become more common.
Well, Dr. Suzuki sounds convincing, but the evidence does not support his assertion that weather events are more frequent or more extreme. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration keeps track of hurricanes that make landfall in the United States. And over the last 150 years, we've had about 300 of those. And so you can go to their website and track these. The interesting thing is, though, back in the early 1900s and 1850s, we were getting about 20 hurricanes that would make landfall in a decade, about 2 per year. Now that's down to about 15 hurricanes in a decade, about 1.5 per year. So it's clear that we're not getting more hurricanes. Actually, it appears that there are a few less. If we look globally, we could take satellite data. Satellites have been looking down on the Earth for about the last 50 years, and they track every tropical cyclone on the surface of the Earth. And they measure its wind speed, and they track its duration. And that produces 2 curves. The top curve is the number of tropical storms on the surface of the Earth in any 12-month period. And there are typically about 80 or 85 of those on the surface of the Earth in any 12-month period. The bottom gray curve is the number of stronger hurricanes. There are typically about 45 or so on the surface of the Earth in any 12-month period. Now, if you look at this chart, it doesn't look like the number of either tropical storms or hurricanes are increasing. This is also a measure of storm strength, because if tropical storms were getting stronger over time, more of them would have the wind speeds that would exceed the hurricane threshold, and the number of hurricanes would be rising. But it isn't happening, despite what you hear in the press. But aren't forest fires evidence of man-made climate change? We had fires in Canada last year that were sending clouds of particles down to New York and Chicago, and many people at the time said, well, these have to be due to man-made warming. And in California, for a number of years, they've had forest fires. Listen to Governor Gavin Newsom at a forest fire.
Is over around climate change. Just come to the state of California. Observe it with your own eyes. It's not an intellectual debate. It's not even debatable. And
so it is true that 10 of the top 20 California fires in the last decade have occurred in the last decade in terms of damage. But the question is that from man-made warming or some other effect? The Little Hoover Commission did a study in 2018, and they said that there have been about a century of fire suppression efforts in California. And they also said that forest fires are needed to keep forests in a normal state. If you don't have the fires, you end up with forests that are choked with debris and dead wood and brush and all sorts of things. Timber harvesting is down 65% since 1980 in California. And the U.S. Forest Service also did a study in 2018. They said there were 147 million dead trees in California. So when you get these fires, they just have so much fuel they can't be put out, and they just burn and burn and burn. So I have 2 words for Governor Newsom, and it's not climate change, it's forest management. By the way, interesting data from NASA published a couple years ago. NASA, again with satellites, this is the National Aeronautic and Space Administration, tracks the number of fires on the surface of the Earth, and they also track burned area. Every year in August, we have about 10,000 fires burning across the globe. Interesting, though, that the burned area has been declining across the world. It's down about 20% over the last 20 years. So how can globally burned area be declining and fires in California increasing because of climate change? It isn't happening, folks. In 2012, we had the Great Plains drought. 80% of U.S. agricultural land was in drought. Dr. James Overpeck of the University of Arizona said, this is what I and many other climate scientists have been warning about. This is what global warming looks like on a regional or a personal level. But again, there's very good data on the portion of the U.S. that's very dry and drought or very wet. Again, this is from NOAA. 2 curves here. This is for the continental U.S. over the last 100 years. The top green curve shows the portion of the U.S. that's very wet. The bottom brown curve shows the portion of the U.S. that's very dry over the last 100 years. If you look at those curves again, doesn't seem to be a real trend of getting wetter or getting drier. And this arrow shows that drought in 2012. Wow, look at that. We see literally dozens of times in the past 100 years when we had similar droughts across the country. Again, not increasing drought despite what people are saying. But what about sea level rise? Dr. James Hansen of NASA, former Vice President Al Gore, have said that we'll get a 20-foot sea level rise by the year 2100. That would be a disaster. Many of the world's port cities would be flooded were that to occur. This is a simulation of what would happen in Florida if we had a 20-foot sea level rise. All those red areas would be flooded. But some things you need to know about sea level rise. First, you can go to NASA and reproduce this chart. NASA estimates that oceans have been rising for the last 20,000 years naturally. They've risen about 120 meters or 390 feet. No climate scientist can tell you when natural sea level rise stopped and man-made sea level rise began. But our best tide gauges show us that the sea levels have been rising about 7 or 8 inches per century over the last 150 years. So there's good news and bad news here. The good news is that it's very unlikely we're going to have a 20-foot sea level rise by the year 2100. The bad news is that water ski Manhattan postcards are not going to be in big demand. Now, by the way, in Virginia you have a special problem I think you know about. Global oceans are rising 7 or 8 inches per century, but the land along the East Coast in many areas, including this area of Virginia, is subsiding. And so the net change, according again to NOAA, is about 16 inches a century or a little bit more along this coast. All we can do, I mean, there's a number of things I could get into on this, but the main thing is people need to adapt. Driving electric cars is not going to stop the oceans from rising. We all want clean air and water, don't we? For about 25 years, I had the joys of kayaking the great whitewater rivers of North America, including West Virginia. But one of the great untold stories of our society today is that we have much cleaner air than we had in the past. The blue curve shows that the EPA common pollutants, carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone particulates, and sulfur dioxide, are down about a combined 80% since 1970. The bottom orange curve shows that what's coming out of the tailpipe of your car, the volatile organic compounds, are down 98% since 1970. So really a tremendous story. But unfortunately, we now have the news media, the Environmental Protection Agency, and our political leaders calling carbon dioxide a pollutant.
It as a pollution problem. It is, in my words, carbon pollution. It's just like every other pollutant. It actually impacts the poor in minority communities more heavily than anyone else. It impacts our kids and our elderly. And carbon pollution exacerbates those problems.
Patriots of Virginia, that is bizarre. Carbon dioxide is not pollutant. It's an odorless, colorless, harmless, invisible gas. Doesn't cause smoke or smog. We inhale only a trace of CO2, but we burn it continuously in our bodies. So every time we exhale 100 times the concentration that we breathed in. Second question for the day here, a little bit of a zany one. What do cannabis growers know that the EPA apparently doesn't know? The answer is that CO2 is green. CO2 makes the plants grow. Any marijuana grower worth his or her salt is pumping carbon dioxide into their greenhouse to make their crop grow bigger and faster. You can see a canister of CO2 over here in the left image. And this device up here is a heater for this greenhouse, but it also fills the greenhouse with carbon dioxide. CO2 is green. CO2 is plant food essential for life on Earth. This is the graph of the world's top 7 food crops. which all grow between 20 and 70% bigger with higher levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Hundreds of peer-reviewed studies show that plants get bigger fruits, they get bigger vegetables, they get thicker tree trunks, they get bigger root systems, they're more resistant to drought. If there's one compound we can put in the environment that's great for the biosphere, carbon dioxide is that compound. Yet today we have every university and every company counting their carbon dioxide footprint. Very, very foolish. So in summary, climate change is natural, not man-made. Global warming is dominated by the natural cycles of the Earth. I talk about that quite a bit in my first two books. Earth's climate cycles are probably being driven by the sun. Man-made greenhouse gases play only a very, very small part of climate and global warming. Well, let me move on to renewable energy, net zero, and electric vehicles. U.S. energy consumption is about almost 80% from hydrocarbons, coal, natural gas, and oil, about 8% nuclear. Renewables in 2022, only about 11%. Most of that was ethanol or biodiesel for your vehicle. But now we have a tremendous push globally for net zero. Net zero means getting rid of coal, oil, and natural gas, getting rid of carbon dioxide emissions, capturing what we can't stop emitting. The goals are usually to get that by 2050. According to the International Energy Agency, quote, reducing global carbon dioxide emissions to net zero by 2050 calls for nothing less than a complete transformation of how we produce, transport, and consume energy. And so today we have 23 states and more than 200 cities that are trying to get to net zero by 2050. Virginia is one of those states. And the goal here is to force adoption of wind and solar. But can the grid run on wind and solar? Three big problems. One is land area, a second is cost, and a third is intermittency. So this is a rhetorical question for you to think about for a moment. Which electricity source is more environmentally friendly? A facility that uses 1 unit of land to produce 1 unit of electricity, or a facility that uses 100 units of land to produce 1 unit of electricity? Seems obvious, right? Well, a guy by the name of Vaclav Smil has written a book on this topic where he looks at all of the land area used for every energy source, including pipelines and waste pits and all sorts of different things. And if you set nuclear at 1 unit of land for 1 unit of electricity, natural gas is about 0.8, coal about 1.4. But look at these renewables. Solar, more than 100 units of land for that 1 unit of electricity. Wind, between 33 and 835 units of land, depending on whether you just count the roads and the concrete pads for the towers or whether you count the whole area. Biomass, 1,500 units of land for 1 unit of electricity. And here's a concrete example, both from California. On the left, we see an image of the Ivanpah solar facility, really an engineering marvel. 3 towers and thousands of mirrors shining light on those towers. The Ivanpah facility produces 793 gigawatt hours a year on 3,500 acres. Compare that to the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, also in California, 16,000 gigawatt hours a year on 750 acres. So the nuclear plant produces more than 20 times the output on 1/5 of the land. There's that 100 to 1 difference. But aren't renewables the cheapest electricity, as the headlines say? Wind power prices now lower than natural gas. Solar and wind are the cheapest new forms of energy. Renewables increasingly beat even coal. Well, these headlines look at a marginal cost of delivering a little bit of electricity, but they don't look at the total cost. So let's look at a graph I've been graphing for about 7 years now. This is a graph of electricity and wind and solar in Europe. On the vertical axis is the wind and solar capacity in watts per person of a nation. On the horizontal axis is the residential electricity price for that nation. Now, if wind and solar are the cheapest, then the nations that have the most wind and solar should have the lowest electricity prices, right? But we see the exact opposite. We see a curve going up this way. An example is Spain, twice the electricity price of the U.S., Denmark, 3 times the electricity price. We see a similar thing in the United States, a little different metric. What I've plotted here are the top 12 wind states and their 15-year electricity price increase. And this blue line is the national average increase. Over the last 15 years in the U.S., electricity prices have increased about 30%, 31%. But 7 of the 12 wind states have had prices that have increased faster. The striking example is California, up 98% in 15 years. And the reason is the wind is often out in remote areas, on ridges. You have to build transmission out there, and then you have to deal with intermittency also. So listen to what Federal Energy Regulatory Commissioner Mark Christie says about the problem that's coming with grid reliability.
Heading for potentially very dire consequences, potentially catastrophic consequences in the United States in terms of the reliability of our grid, and I think that the basic reason is we're facing a shortfall of power supply. We are facing cascading retirements of dispatchable resources, specifically coal and, a lesser extent, gas. And the problem with losing that many dispatchable resources is you're losing the supply that's going to keep the lights on.
Wind intermittency is fundamentally incompatible with reliable power. This is a look at a month in Texas, and you can see that, and this is the wind generation. It goes up to about 8,000 megawatts, and it drops to 0 in a couple days. And this just goes over and over. And the power system managers know that as you add more and more wind and solar to the grid, you have to keep around the traditional power plants, the nuclear, the coal, the natural gas, and you have to turn those up when wind and solar are not available. By the way, solar has its own special problems. I like this picture of this young girl in England cleaning off the solar panels. Can't you just feel the solar power from that picture? But if you don't keep around the wind, if you don't keep around the traditional energy sources and putting in a lot of wind and solar, then you end up with electricity blackouts. California had rolling blackouts in August 2020. California gets about 20% of their electricity from solar in August until about 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. at night, and then it disappears. And if you have anything else in the system that fails, then you have to institute blackouts to keep the system from crashing. Texas had lethal blackouts in February of 2021. Electricity was off for 72 hours to 4.5 million people, and they had somewhere between 200 and 700 people die during that event. That is more than all but one hurricane in history. We also have efforts to electrify everything, to ban gas appliances, furnaces, stoves, water heaters, force those to be electric, and also to push everybody to get electric vehicles. We have a lot of articles being published saying that gas stoves provide health issues. Folks, I've written some papers on that. If you look at those papers, they're not written by medical people, they're written by climate people who want you to get rid of your gas stove. And they do things like they take a kitchen, they turn on the oven and the stove, and they seal the whole kitchen with saran wrap so that they can build up the concentration of nitrogen oxide or something. Those are abnormal conditions. You should have carbon monoxide detectors in your house, but you should all be confident that your gas systems are not a health hazard. And of course, electric heat is more expensive, electric water heaters, than gas. But we currently have a war going on over gas stoves in the United States. We have 6 states, the red ones there, where counties and cities have banned the installation of gas in new construction. And they get all the headlines, but what you don't see is that there are 19 states that have passed laws saying, Mr. City Mayor, County Manager, you can't ban certain energy sources in new construction. And our electric cars the wave of the future.
believe that we can own the 21st century market again by moving to electric vehicles.
So electric vehicles are penetrating world markets. Last year they were about 16% of new light vehicles sold in the world, about 9% in the US, more in Europe, more in China. Today there are about 38 million EVs on the road out of 1.5 billion light vehicles, a little over 2%. Electric vehicles have certain advantages. You can charge them at home, which can be very inexpensive, quieter ride. Simpler engines should produce lower maintenance, but so far we haven't seen that with EVs, largely because the tires wear out faster, the vehicles are heavier. And a big EV disadvantage is weight and driving range. So up on the right here I have a little model of a Honda Civic. It carries 77.5 pounds of fuel in a 12.4 gallon gas tank. It can go about 360 miles. If you take that 77 pounds and put it into a battery in a Chevy Volt, you can go 21 miles. You have to increase the battery size by a factor of 17 to go the same distance. After drivetrain adjustments, you get about 9 pounds of battery is needed for 1 pound of gasoline to go the same distance. That means electric vehicles are going to be about 50% heavier than gasoline cars. And wow, those EV pickups are really heavy, aren't they? This up here is a Ford F-150 gasoline vehicle, 4,677 pounds, but the three on the bottom are electric vehicles. Ford F-150 Lightning, 6,500 pounds, the Rivian R1T, 7,100 pounds, and taking the cake, the Chevy Silverado, 8,500 pounds. So if Quint from Jaws were here, he'd say 4 tons of them. You got a 4-ton pickup truck there, folks. Another disadvantage is EV price. We've had a price war going on for the last year or two in electric vehicles, so prices have come down, but they're still about 20 or 25% more expensive than a gasoline car. Again, operating costs, less expensive to charge at home, but more expensive at a public charger typically, except in Europe now the price of electricity has gotten so high that it's as expensive to charge at home as it is to run a gasoline car. This cost gap is likely to increase because of the metals that are needed for EV batteries. A single 1,000-pound car battery moves about 500,000 pounds of earth to get the metals for that battery. Global output of lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper is going to need to increase 5 to 10 times if we all do this transition to EVs. Electric vehicles are not for cold weather. At about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, you lose 20% of your driving range. And then if you go down to about 10 Fahrenheit, literally the battery will not charge outside at that temperature. If you saw the national news about Chicago about a month ago, all these people pushing EVs around to try and get them charged. By the way, when you're charging your EV, you're not supposed to be running the heater. So people are standing there freezing at 0 degrees, trying to get their EV to charge, and they won't charge. By the way, Canada is considering a 100% electric vehicle mandate by 2035. So if you don't have a garage that you run all winter in heat to charge your vehicle, you just won't be able to drive from December to February. The big disadvantage is insurance. In England now, it's hard to get EV insurance, and it can cost you £5,000 to insure an electric vehicle. In the U.S., the insurance rates for EV are about 70% higher than an internal combustion engine car. Hertz has they committed to 100,000 EVs. I think they bought about they bought about 60,000 from Tesla. They're now getting rid of them. They reduced their fleet by about a third because they're much more expensive to repair and to maintain. If you have a minor collision and the battery is affected in any way, there's no way to repair the battery. And you have to replace it, which can be a charge as much as $20,000. So they've got some issues with insurance. There's a very poor business case for chargers. A gasoline pump costs about $20,000, and you can serve a customer in something like 5 or 6 minutes. A 50 kilowatt high-speed DC charger costs $100,000, and you can serve a customer in a half hour. So the pump serves 5 times the customers and 1/5 of the capital cost. For that reason, the gas stations don't really want to be putting these things in. So we're seeing faltering electric vehicle demand. EV inventories are way up. There's a poor demand for pickup trucks for EVs. Ford lost over $60,000 last year on their electric vehicle sales. GM lost quite a bit as well. It seems like the people that want an EV for a second car, a cool Tesla, have gotten those, and now the market's a little bit saturated, a little bit slow. So the early adopter phase is over. If you're in a apartment and you don't want to run a charging cable over the public walkway, there are just a lot of issues with EVs that are mounting up. Well, let me talk a little bit about the mad world of climatism. The United Nations urges people to eat insects to fight world hunger. And they say that insects are reported to emit less greenhouse gases and less ammonia than cattle or pigs, and they require significantly less land or water than cattle rearing. And so we have some people trying to put this into effect. There was a teacher in Utah that's giving kids insects to eat in class to try and teach them that they should be eating bugs and not beef. And then we have this professor in Sweden who is urging people to eat human flesh to stop global warming. And he actually, I assume that people are killed before you eat their flesh, but they die or something. And he actually polls his audience to see how many people were willing to try human flesh after his lecture. Oh, and we have to manage cattle to stop climate change. By the way, the mayor of New York just started suing a beef company earlier this week. And they're feeding cattle seaweed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So much for grass-fed beef, right? Or they're potty training their cows to try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Oh, and my electric car is a little overheated. This is an image from Elk Grove in the United States where a guy was driving his Tesla. The car started to shake. He pulled over and stopped and got out, and the car burst into flames. He was not able to save the child seats in the back. He was pleased that his kids were not along with him on the trip. But this is a little issue. These vehicles can self-ignite. Oh, and there's new excuses now. Miami New Times, global warming makes couples cheat. So now you can tell your wife, global warming made me do it. Or how about New York Times? There was an article saying you should mate with short people to help save the planet. There's just an endless stream of this crazy stuff, folks. Well, let's talk about the future a little bit. I love my favorite sage, Yogi Berra, Yankees catcher. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. You all understand that nothing is zero emissions, right? If you build any kind of a building, and you put in glass, and you put in copper for pipes, you put in ceramic, you put in concrete, you put in steel, all of those things emit carbon dioxide when they're produced and when they're transported. You can't even build a grass hut that's zero emissions. You cut down wood and you cut down grass, carbon dioxide is emitted. We're going to have a coming green breakdown. We have the world pushing for this net zero by 2050. It's more than a reach-out goal. It's an impossibility. It's not going to occur. It's going to produce higher energy prices, electricity blackouts, less freedom because they're going to want to ban your appliances and your vehicles, and transnational energy shocks. People are going to demand a return to low-cost, reliable energy. An example of price rises, as we already talked about a little bit, is California, which passed up just about all of New England last year to become the third highest in the country, behind Hawaii and I guess Rhode Island now. Green California, those policies are boosting prices up. And by the way, they're asking for another 20 or 30% rate increase for this year. Really, really high. We're starting to see power outages increasing in the United States. This is data from the U.S. Department of Energy. Back about 10 years ago, the average outage for an electricity users was about 3.5 hours a year. But that is now up to 5 or 6 or 7 hours a year. And as we put in more intermittent wind and solar, we're going to have more and more outages. EPA regulations are forcing an EV transition right now. There are limits on carbon dioxide emissions per mile driven. There are mileage limits, fleet mileage limits for manufacturers. By 2035, it's going to be impossible for any automaker to produce a line of gasoline cars if these things aren't changed. Europe just went through an energy crisis. They had natural gas prices go up by a factor of 5, electricity go up by a factor of 6. Those have since come down, but they've been dependent on imported natural gas, not fracking for any of their own. They've done a lot of wind and solar. They've closed nuclear plants. The problem is that when you have a cold snap or a real hot period of time or an embargo or a war, you can't turn up the wind and solar. And so Europe is now retreating from green energy. They haven't said so, but they're restarting coal-fired power plants. They're building 25 new liquefied natural gas terminals. And this is just, their path is the wrong path to take. Let's solve real environmental problems. Water pollution globally is a big issue. Water, 80% of the world's wastewater is discharged untreated into rivers, lakes, and streams. If you remember about 7 years ago, the swimmers in the Olympics in Brazil were swimming in water they didn't want to swim in. It wasn't very clean. Brazil's just building its first water treatment plants. Plastic litter in the oceans is a problem. It's often overstated, but we have about 100 million tons of plastic in the ocean, and we're adding about 10 million a year. Almost none of that comes from the United States or Europe. It's pretty much all developing nations or Asia. Banning straws in Virginia Beach is not going to have any effect on plastic in the oceans, really. But let's solve these problems instead of trying to stop carbon dioxide emissions, which is not the right thing to do. I have great news about global warming. Your SUV is not causing dangerous global warming. Water vapor is Earth's dominant greenhouse gas. Human industry is responsible for about 1 or 2% of Earth's greenhouse effect. The regulations passed by the EPA are not going to stop the oceans from rising. There's no law that the state of Virginia can pass that is going to make storms less frequent or less severe. Because climate is dominated by natural factors, thousands of laws across hundreds of nations are not going to have a measurable effect on global temperatures. Interesting image here. The woman on the left was the head of the Department of Meteorology and Climate Science at San Jose University several years back. The guy on the right is one of her scholars. If you look closely, you can see she's holding a match under my second book, The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism. They put this up on the internet. And they took it down about 5 hours later. About 20 articles were written about this. I don't think they ever really burned the book, but but it's clear that the universities don't want to hear the crazy idea that climate could be dominated by natural factors, not man-made emissions. By the way, I have a number of these here. If you have a student in school or a child or a grandkid in school, this is just a great book for them to offset what they're getting in school, which isn't really a straight story. Anyway, thank you very much. You can go to my website, stevegoreham.com. I'm also a board member of the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Nature. And I'm open to questions and challenges. Yes, sir.
How deep is the source of gold and gas and oil?
Oh yeah, let's here, grab him this one.
Yeah.
Since we're done with that.
I'm going to ask you to repeat.
Please repeat. Thanks.
So if we only use gas and oil and don't use the other things that are talked about as far as saving, how deep are our resources to last us for the next entire century of gas and oil and coal?
We probably have more than a century. It was thought we would get to peak oil in the early 2000s. The fracking revolution changed that in the United States. We have a lot of oil and gas around the world. If you look at sometimes I show some graphs which show the consumption globally of oil and gas and the reserves of oil and gas. And the reserves have been growing faster for the last 50 years than the consumption. We used to have about 20 years of reserves. Now we have about 50 years of reserves. So it's very unlikely we're going to run out of oil and natural gas. We just need to look to technology to develop new energy sources, and they will over time.
So in 50 years, we've got the problem of not enough oil and gas, do you think?
I don't think so. I think that we have many, many centuries of that. Yes, sir.
Two real quick things. Number one, this audience is very small here, and it's not made up of people who make the laws, okay?
Yep.
So the important thing for people like you is to how many times do you get to speak to the lawmakers, okay? And present this information to the lawmakers so that they could quit making these idiotic laws.
Not too happy. I would be happy to do that. I've spoken in the state of Illinois, and I spoke
How
once.
about in Congress?
I have not been invited to Congress. No, I mostly speak to. I'd be happy to do it. I mostly speak to business, industry, metals, transportation, utilities, and the reason is that they pay me typically to go speak. I'm a professional speaker, so that's what I do typically. But I would be happy to. If someone wanted to invite me to Congress, that would be fine.
Yeah, well, at the higher plane, I know a lot of the world-renowned climate scientists in your league, and they have a terrible megaphone capability. So we have the teenage nitwit girl, Greta, getting a chance to speak to the United Nations.
Yep.
And you guys don't have a good enough megaphone. But specifically, you need to start talking to the law.
Well, we're working on it. Again, this is going to fall apart because the economics and the science don't favor what is going on. And so people are eventually going to push back when the prices get too high and their lights are going out and they can't get the vehicles they need, and we end up with these energy shocks. So it is going to occur. It's going to force us to stop this net zero stuff. Yes, sir.
Something I've never heard is when you pull up to a charging station at a Wawa, how much does it cost to actually charge your car there as opposed to the gas?
Well, I think the prices aren't real high right now. In my last book, Green Breakdown, I talk about a study that was done in Michigan that says actually it is a little more expensive to charge than to buy the regular petrol. And then they added a bunch of costs for waiting times and driving to places as well. So if you do that, it's much more expensive. But the problem is that none of these places are making money either. There is nobody that I know can make money on a charging station today because most people want to charge at home. So if you took all the gas stations and you said, okay, let's take 80% out of that, and everybody's going to fill up at home with the gasoline. We're only going to get 20% of the revenue. The gas stations should have a big problem as well, and the charging stations are more expensive. And if you look at these charging stocks, they have just crashed. They're all down about 90% from what they were. They can't make money on an individual charge. I think what's going to happen, unfortunately, is that utilities are going to take this over, and they're going to start charging ratepayers for a portion of this, and they're going to get government subsidies. I think that's the only way a network of charging systems can be done nationwide. By the way, if anybody knows that they're making money on chargers, I'm happy to accept that information, but I just don't think it's happening anywhere. And all of the studies I've seen say they do not break even. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. You were talking before about land subsidence.
Yeah.
Is that naturally occurring? Is there anything that can be done about it? I know the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission is trying to inject water into the ground.
Yes, most of it's natural, but it can also subside based on the water you take out of a water table. And there are those problems, I think, in Virginia. There are some problems in Florida where that is occurring. The water table underneath is being drawn out, and so the land is sinking. So I think in Virginia they're trying to do desalination, and they're also cleaning wastewater and re-injecting it, which I think is a good thing to do. That will probably reduce the subsidence. I just don't know how much that will be out of the roughly 8 inches or so, that you're getting.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have a question. This will be long term about solar farms.
Okay.
after the land is leased by the farmer, then years and years later, what shape is that land in? Is it now barren? After years and years and years, or at least that is.
Well, I think certainly solar covers the land and prevents the sunlight from getting there, and so it interrupts the natural land. I think, are you referring to what happens after they take the farm down, the installation down? It probably will return at some time to its previous, but it might take a few years. I don't know the details on that.
Sterilizes the soil.
Sterilizes the soil.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, I saw yesterday a post saying it was like the warmest February, or second warmest February, I guess, since 1950.
Okay.
And I was wondering, it seemed like it was still pretty cold. For example, like the wind chill was really bad all month and things of that nature. Just all winter, it's really been cold, a lot colder than the temperature outside. And so I was wondering if you had any insight into, if there's like been a greater wind chill, like, the jet stream has been offsetting some of the warmer temperatures with the wind chill.
It's tough to tell locally and broaden it to national or international sorts of things. I think we've certainly had a gentle warming since about 1880 or so. We've been coming out of the little ice age period when it was very cool. We've had a gentle warming, which, by the way, is great for society, and so people are alarmed at that, and they shouldn't be. I often, if I have time, more minutes to speak, I'll say, okay, which is more difficult for people, cold climates, cold weather, or warm weather? And the audience always gets it right. Cold weather is always worse for people. If you look at when our flu seasons are, they're from about October to March, the cold months. In the southern hemisphere, they're from June to September. They're cold months down there. If you look at COVID-19 cases, you find typically more of those occur in the winter months, in the cold months, than in the warm months. There are many, many studies that say that more people die during cold months than warm months. Some studies say it's up to 9 times as many people die. So if we have a little bit of warming, we're going to have less people die on the globe. It's better for people. But nevertheless, we got the U.S. Medical Association saying that cold weather is harmful for people, and our own U.S. government tells us that. So I like to ask audiences, why do people retire to Florida and Arizona and Texas? Why don't they retire to North Dakota and Alaska and Saskatchewan? Aren't they foolish? Don't they know that warm climates are dangerous? This whole thing is just loony from every aspect of common sense.
Steve.
Yeah.
With the global tensions that are going on today, I'm reflected back to World War II and what happened after Congress declared war against Japan and then subsequently with Germany. All of our steel manufacturing for cars and everything else in this country turned almost overnight into manufacturing everything for the war. Tanks, jeeps, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We had a tremendous supply of steel and steel factories here.
Yeah.
That's what built this country and part of the rest of the world. That's all pretty much gone now. How today do you think we could react if we were attacked by another nation or nations to turn around and build up our nation's ammunition and everything else to protect ourselves from intruding armies?
Yeah, I'm really not qualified to answer that, so I'm not going to venture an answer to that kind of question. I am concerned about, I was fortunate to meet, what is the gentleman's name now? I think it's Mr. Chen, who's on Fox News a lot. He's a China expert, right, yeah. And he said he thought there was a greater than 50% chance that China would invade Taiwan in the next couple of years. So that's the thing I really worry about. What's his first name anyway?
I know you're talking.
But I'm really not qualified to talk about how we could ramp up military or steel.
But the issue was of the coal that it takes.
Yeah.
And
we have lots of coal.
To build steel. To make steel, make coke.
Well, they're trying to do that with hydrogen now, as you may know. There's a big push to produce green hydrogen across the world. I've written several articles on that. That's not going to happen as well. it's a situation where we have the governments are trying to create a new industry called the hydrogen fuel industry. One of those doesn't exist today. It's just not going to happen. And they're putting on massive subsidies to do that, the Obama administration. So a very bad idea. Look up my articles. Anyone else?
I have a question, so does Dan here. Just about hydrogen, it's very slippery stuff. It's hard to keep it anywhere. It likes to...
Very small molecule, yes.
Get out of tanks.
Yes, it is. Just by the way, in light of your comment here about talking about the warmest ever and so on, if anybody wants to give me their email, I have a nice chart for 50 states, each of the 50 states that records, since data has been recorded, the maximum temperature and the minimum temperature since data has been taken here. And if you look at that chart, you'll find out that maximum temperatures for the 50 states are dominated by the Dust Bowl years.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
the
right.
Dust Bowl years. So that's the chart you should have. And you look down there and you say, how many of these happened before 1940, the highs?
Yeah.
And you're going
Sometimes I show that when I present. That's data from NOAA. 24 of the 50 state record high temperatures were set during the 1930s. 36 of the state record high temperatures were in the 1970s or earlier. That's what you refer to. So we've had warmer times in the past.
Within memory.
Yep.
Well, if there are no further questions, let's have another round of applause. Oh, and he's got his books here if you want to buy them. On the back table, he'll take a credit card if you need to, and I'm going to ask him to sign.
I'm going to come get this stuff in a minute, if that's all right. We'll make the books. All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, I guess I'm negligent. Once again. You're not leaving, are you, very soon?
No.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Go for it.
Great. Let's see. Well, Robert is going to give us an elections announcement.
No. Not right this moment.
No?
You got some other people that are here to make announcements.
Okay, well, you're top of the list here, so I will,
I'm always
I
top.
will bypass you.
Yes, please.
And go on to candidates who have campaign announcements. Candidates are their representative, whichever. Thank you. And we're on camera. That's good.
Hi everybody, I'm David Karen. I've spoken with all of you so far, and I'm running for 2nd District Chairman. We have a convention on Saturday, April 27th at the Wave Church. And some of you have asked what the 2nd District Chairman's, what our duties entail. And so basically, the 2nd District is represented by Jen Kiggins, and so I would be the chairman of the party at the local level. I would be in charge of all the units throughout the district, working with the unit chairmans. I don't want to say in charge, but working with the unit chairmans to run the local parties. And so basically, I want to put more power to the people. One of the issues that we have right now with the 2nd District Chair and the people running for State Central, the current State Central representatives, is that they all vote the same way on State Central, and so that I think is a big problem. There's a lot of cronyism there. There's no representative for somebody who disagrees with the way that all 4 of them are voting, and so I think it's important that we have leaders that are willing to listen to the people and give different options of voting at the party level. And so on top of that, all the chairs that are in the district are people that are working with the district chairman. They're all thinking the same way, voting the same way. They all work together in a very like crony type way. And so, we really, anybody who disagrees or isn't, totally on board with the chairman, like what happened in Suffolk, he dissolves their committee. He finds a way to dissolve their committee and, takes it to State Central. But, here in Virginia Beach, we've had a lot of issues at the party level, and at the same time, he's given the current chairman a pass. For example, last November, we voted on having an endorsement committee for local elections, and Kenny Golden was voted as the chair. And then in January of 2023, when we finally had a meeting, again, since the December meeting was the Christmas party, he came and just told us that the current 2nd District Chair, Dennis Free, would be the endorsement committee chair and not Kenny Golden. And so then, we did try to push back in February, but Kenny graciously said that he would go along with it because the only option that we had was to appeal the decision to the 2nd District Chair, Dennis Free, who was also the chairman of the endorsement committee. So that would have been pretty much pointless. So, so in short, I believe we need new leadership that isn't going to ignore the wishes of the membership within the party, and will be willing to work with the chairs and represent the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Robert, you have a question?
Oh, no, I just, I'm sorry.
Okay. A question for you, sir.
I was just wondering, you don't have to be a member of the Republican Party to vote for you? Why is that?
Good.
Correct. Yes, you just have to be a voter within the district. Yes.
You have to sign up to go vote?
Right. Yes, in order to vote, you have to sign up to vote in the convention, and the deadline for that is March 22nd. And there's a pre-file sheet that has to be filled out and handed in at Virginia Beach, to the headquarters. And once again, it's the deadline. That's the March 22nd is only for Virginia Beach voters. Every unit has a different deadline. Most of them are passed already. Chesapeake is March 8th, and it's all about these pre-file forms that have to be turned in. And this is the first time that we've had an election since 2016 for this particular seat because the incumbent and my opponent has been unopposed since then, and so that so that's the situation there. Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Bill, while Laura's coming up there, there's two compelling things that need to be brought to the attention of not only everyone here, but our viewing audience. And that is collective bargaining. It bypassed the committee to, I think, next year, or year 2026. Okay. So that is to establish unions in our cities. And now, that does not discount the fact that it's still going to be coming before City Council for a vote locally here. And that's the requirement. So you may start out with only 1 or 2 units, like the police or the fire or the rescue, whatever. And then once that door opens up, there'll be pockets all throughout the entire city. Now, they've estimated it's going to millions of dollars just to create new administration to cover these programs. This is the worst thing that could happen in a right-to-work state, which we are the furthest northern right-to-work state in the nation. So we've got to maintain this to keep our economic development going forward. Number 2 is the upcoming real estate tax rate. Our current rate is 99 cents. The new rate by law on Part A, it's by law, you have to reduce that rate to a neutral rate, which right now is going to be 92 cents. So you take the 99 cent, drop it down to 92 cents. Then what happens is Part B gives the city council or local government the ability to raise that up again. Now, you'll have people on the city council say, well, we're not going to raise it, we're not going to increase your taxes, but yes, you are.
because by mandate, if you go from 99 down to 92, and then you take it back up to 99 cents, it's a tax increase. Then what they're talking about, they will then drop that 2 cents. So it'll be 97 cents. It's a big con job. And some of the people on the council, we think they know better, like Rosemary Wilson says, oh, we're not raising taxes. Yes, you are. And so Dyer, all the rest of them that just don't understand how the law works and how that formula works. We, the folks out here in the community, the watchdog groups and everybody who's paying the taxes, we want that rate dropped down not only to 92, we want to take it down to 88 cents. Because that will help offset and compensate for all the rising taxes that they're going to be heaping on, plus inflation. It's not going away, and it's killing middle-class America. And so many people are going into bankruptcy of all these things right now. So we've got to get behind this, and we're the only ones out here, the TLP and the Tea Party. We don't understand why the Democrats are always for the little people, why they aren't fighting this, and the Republicans, conservative Republicans, stopping these tax increases and the expansion of government. And if there's anybody in here from the Democrat Party or the Republican Party that would like to address that, I would love to hear it. And so would our audience. Thank you.
My name is Laura Hughes, and I would like to say I have a few things to address here. The first being, I fully support David Caron to replace the current 2nd District Chair. In addition to the chair for that race, you also have 3 representatives from around the district. Currently, we have 1 in Virginia Beach, 1 in Chesapeake, and 1 on the Eastern Shore. And I do believe it's good to have people from around the district. However, I am running for one of those seats as well. One of the reasons I decided to run is because I was looking at some of the votes they were taking at State Central, and I wasn't happy with them. So I sent emails to the current district chair and also the current Virginia Beach unit chair, who happens to be one of the people who's also running, and asked about some of these votes. So the district chair sent me an email letting me know basically what was best for me, how he decided to vote, and the current chair in Virginia Beach didn't respond at all. So one of the things I would say to you is I'm getting a little bit tired of people running to be leaders. We need people to run to be representatives. And if you can't tell me how you did your due diligence to find out what your constituents want, you're not a representative. You're voting for yourself. And I believe that these elected officials should have some dedicated Facebook page or website that posts the agenda. You want your constituents to look at this and reach out and tell you what they want so that you can vote their values. So I'm encouraging you to vote for both me and David. That election is our 2nd District Convention that will be at Wade Church on Great Neck Road, April 27th from 10 to 3. You do have to pre-file, as David mentioned. I have some of the pre-file forms here. And to know if you live in the 2nd District, if Jen Higgins is your congressperson, you're in the 2nd District. It's all of Virginia Beach, all of the Eastern Shore, part of Chesapeake, Franklin County, Southampton, and Isle of Wight. I believe Franklin's call is getting ready to come out. Everything else has closed except for Virginia Beach, which is due by March 22nd, and Chesapeake, which is due by March 8th. I actually have some Chesapeake forms as well for anyone here who lives in Chesapeake. We're happy to turn them in for you. One misconception is one of the candidates running has told people, if I filed your paperwork for you, then you have to vote for me. That is actually not correct. To anyone who has already filed, whether you've given me your paperwork or any other candidate or turned it in yourself at your unit, you are not beholden to anybody. You need to take time to listen to all the candidates and vote for the person that you think is best for that job. Secondly, I am also running to be chair of the Virginia Beach Republican Party. We really need some new leadership. We have a huge problem with transparency. We have a huge problem with the lengths of the meetings. You should be able to get your business done in roughly an hour unless something else is going on. I don't think we need 45 minutes of chairman's remarks chastising the body. But also, I tend to agree with Mr. Dean here. We should be taking a stand on issues. We join this party. We try to get active because we want to follow the Republican creed. Our jobs are to get Republicans elected and make sure that those Republicans are following the Republican creed. When you give your time, talent, and treasure, you have a right to hold your elected officials accountable. They are accountable to you. We don't do that vote my conscience, because you're representing yourself at that point. You need to represent your constituency. You need to be held accountable. I don't want to hear that you're speaking ill of someone if I'm asking about that voting record. If you're an elected official and I'm speaking about your voting record and you consider me speaking ill of you, the problem isn't my speaking. The problem is your voting record, and that's something that needs to be discussed. We also need a party who's not encouraging people to split races. We lost 2 city council seats and 1 school board seat because our party encouraged splitters to run instead of taking a stand. And then as far as this endorsement committee goes, yes, we had our body make a motion and vote to establish a committee to present to us an endorsement process. And we did direct the chair to have Kenny Golden as our chair. And they were supposed to bring us something last April. They brought us something in December. Early voting had already, actually it didn't come out until January. No, it was February. Oh my gosh. Yes, it was almost a year late. We'd already been through other election cycles, yet our chair set us up to vote to endorse a candidate after voting had started. We have a 6-week voting window. 2 weeks had passed and we started voting on it, which makes no sense whatsoever. We can't do this anymore. We need to be organized. We need to work together. We need to man polls. I would like your support. Our chair race is on March 23rd at Central Library from 10 to 3. The only qualification you need to vote is you have to be a registered voter and you have to live in Virginia Beach. And I would love to have your support. Thank you.
In that chair race, can someone give you a proxy who won't be present? No, you have to be present.
Yeah, no provisional voting, no early voting. Walk in, walk out. It takes about 2 minutes.
But you have to be in town.
You have to be in town.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
No more candidates?
No more? No.
Good.
Okay, I just wanted to make an announcement that our next Tea Party meeting is March 14th at the Masonic Lodge, 7 p.m., 2849 Princess Anne Road. And our guest speakers are going to be Hung Kao, who tried to zoom in at our last meeting and we couldn't hear him, and Eddie Garcia. Both of them are running for the U.S. Senate primary in June. So that's the last of the 8 that are running. If you haven't heard the other 6, you can go on our Facebook page and hit watch video. It'll give you the last meeting. You can go to our website. It'll have the last meeting on there. You can go to our YouTube channel and it'll have all of our meetings there. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana. All right. Robert, would you like to come up and get on camera?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duke. In addition to the information I just gave you a few minutes ago, there's some additional troubling things going on in our city right now, which points to how astute or lacking our city employees, and namely City Council, because ultimately they approve what the city manager authorizes. They're like country bumpkins. And I'm going to give you an example. What's going on at the oceanfront where Mr. Swain's office is now. Where are you, Steve?
Corner of Arctic and 30th.
Arctic and 30th. Well, right down the street is the Atlantic Park, which is under construction. So what we have is we have this gigantic Atlantic Ocean, and a block off that now they're building a surf park. So you'll be able to surf in this park. And there's going to be some other associated, there's going to be some apartments there and some garages and a performing arts center and all that. What is troubling about this? Mr. Swain, if I go to your law firm and say, could you draft me papers for a loan to the bank,
and say, Truist Bank, I'd like to borrow $100,000 to build a home. And when you draft that up, you'll say, okay, when do you want to start payments? I say, well, after the whole home is built in that, I would like to have 7 years before I start making you payments. Do you think any bank in this city or anywhere in the world would approve that paper? Zero. Exactly right. This park, you here in this room and that's watching this online, we've given the developers $90 million to start, help construction, everything else. Now they've already come back to the well for another 60. And when John Moss and myself and Diana went to the budget office of finance, we said, after all this money that we put in, you built the park, when can we start seeing a return on that investment in the way of taxes and fees back to pay off this debt? Their answer was, best estimate, and after the whole project is finished, all the construction, all the facilities, everything, we're looking at around 7 to 7.5 years before we, the taxpayers, will see a return on that investment. That was at the $90 million. Now we've added on another $60 million. Now the project is quasi under stop work order because they found arsenic in the ground right underneath the facility, so they're doing all their environmental things. Now the problem is, who's going to be responsible for paying for all this remediation? Well, the Economic Development Authority, they say they've reached their limit of how much money they're going to contribute to this. So it's going to be very interesting, the legality, how this part goes forward. And again, once again, as so evidenced by Linda Renius, our city auditor, there's only one project built in this city, from the Sportsplex, all of these things, the Convention Center, Sandler Center, there's only one, and that was the amphitheater years and years ago, 1996, I think it was. So that was Solardora back then. It was a pretty good contract. But everything since, every one of these projects is running in the red, which means your tax dollars have to be transferred out of the general fund over to operating expenses for all these projects. None of them are making any money. So the better question is, why are we doing it? Why are we doing the basic things for the core government? And then the old expression is, but for. Yeah, but for, if we didn't do this, we wouldn't be putting people in the hotel rooms, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they're making money, but what about the people who are putting up the equity? It's a big problem. There's another thing underway that they want to develop some land around the convention center. And a lot of that land was condemned. Now this was prior to the eminent domain constitutional amendment, said you could not take private property, give it to a developer for them to do a project for economic development. When we changed the law, it says you can only do it for public facilities. So under this new one, under the new constitutional amendment, you could not take private property from somebody and then hold it and then decide, well, we're gonna do something else with it. It has to go back to the original owner. He's got to have first right of refusal. So we don't know what's going to happen. Diane, do you remember the name of the group that's can't remember the name that wants to do the convention center? It's
No, I don't.
I can't remember the name of it. Anyhow, it's working underground right now.
No, that's the convention center?
Yeah, by the convention center. They want to develop some.
Convention center, hotel.
Yeah, hotel, all of that.
Housing, and we get to build the parking garages.
Yes. Yeah. And the biggest ticket in any development is the cost of parking garages. They're running up to $30,000 per space. So you are paying for it. Capstone, that's the name of it. Keep that under your mind. Capstone is this development. And of course the other one at the oceanfront, and that is called Vulture. Oh no, excuse me. It's called Venture. Vulture. So I kid with them a lot. So keep all these things that are going on right now. We're coming up into the budget process, and they're just spending money like a bunch of drunken sailors. I was in the Marine Corps and we didn't drink, so we use that phrase. So anything for the good of the cause before we adjourn? I'm sorry about the weather and that caught everybody. Nothing else from the floor. Steve, thank you for coming here from Illinois, and this will be uploaded to YouTube. And if anybody's going through any marital problems, please see Laura Hughes here. And if you have any other problems with murder, especially murder, Steve Swain's here. Steve has represented some high cases over the years, and he's with Swain Roloff Swain, yes, and used to be another partner years ago.
There's been a lot of them.
Yeah, there's been a lot of them.
Whenever you commit that crime, come to see me. Okay?
Come and see Steve, because you have had some high-profile things over the years. So, and he's got some cards on him, and he'll give you a discount if you say you come here. So thank you all very much. God bless everybody. And the mayor and the vice mayor of Bay Colony is here today. Bud Keene and his lovely wife. So have a great weekend.
Beautiful wife. What do you mean ugly? My beautiful wife.
I didn't say
He said lovely.
lovely.
Oh, lovely.
By the way, speaking of steel, Bud Keene was with Armco, and they were one of the biggest producers of steel in the country, but they're no longer around, right, Bud?
He's the man of steel.
Yeah, the man of steel. So he was the man of steel. Thank you all very much. Have a great. Thank you for showing up, and we adjourn. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna buy a book. Excuse me.
She has him, so I'm not sure.
Oh, it's something wrong with me that you would wait on me. Don't you think I'm hot?
Of course I do.
We're on television. Hey, oh, Steve, I'm waiting. Oh, wait a minute.
She got here first.
I got to shut this off. Oh, man. Yeah, please. Okay, and.